afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Washington Brief for Tuesday, January 6, 2026, our first webcast of the new year. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Michael Jenkins, president of the Washington Times Foundation, which sponsors this webcast. Dr. Jenkins is also president of the Washington Times Holdings, the LLC that owns the Times news organization. He's led many successful fact-finding trips to Korea for policy experts and peace initiatives to the Middle East for the Universal Peace Federation. Dr. Jenkins, welcome and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Larry. Thank you. Today's Washington Brief is going to be most interesting. The topic is what the 2025 Trump National Security Doctrine means for the United States and the world. President Trump's newly released national security strategy is a roadmap for a strong American leadership and dominant global presence in the Americas, Indo-Pacific, and Europe, emphasizing strategic restraint. Does it signify a fundamental shift in U.S. national security priorities away from the great power rivalry with China and Russia and from the U.S. traditional allies in Europe and Asia, which might lead to a more war-prone and less secure world, as Trump's critics argue? Or does it posit simultaneous great power competition and hemispheric security as mutually reinforcing? One thing we know for sure, this has been a powerful beginning to a new year with all that's going on in the Americas. But our focus will be on the strategy itself. I'm very happy to introduce at this time Dr. Nadia Schadlow, who is our guest panelist. Dr. Schadlow is a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute and a co-chair of the Hamilton Commission on Securing America's National Security Innovation Base. She conducts research and analysis on a range of issues at the intersection of strategy, national security, and technology. She writes on topics that include energy vulnerabilities, as well as climate and defense policy, and the disconnects between strategy and operational policies. Her articles have appeared in Foreign Affairs, Foreign Policy, The Hill, Parameters, The Wall Street Journal, Philanthropy, and soon in the Washington Times. Dr. Schadlow was most recently U.S. Deputy National Security Advisor for Strategy, and in that capacity, she led the drafting of the publication of the 2017 National Security Strategy of the United States. Earlier in her career, she served as a senior program officer in the International Security and Foreign Policy Program and the Smith Richardson Foundation, where she helped clarify and identify strategic issues that warranted further attention from the U.S. policy community. Dr. Schadlow holds a BA in Government and Soviet Studies from Cornell and an MA and PhD from the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, known as SAIS. Our commentary will come from Dr. Alexandre Mansourov. Dr. Mansourov is adjunct professor of security studies at the Edmund A. Walsh School of Foreign Service at Georgetown University in Washington. He's also an adjunct professor of Korean studies at SAIS at Johns Hopkins University. Our moderator today is Ambassador Joseph DeTrani, the former special envoy to the six-party talks with North Korea and former director of National Counterproliferation Center. He's a senior advisor at Sandia National Laboratories and author of The North Korean Threat, Intelligence and Diplomacy. Ambassador DeTrani will have a fine show today. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Happy New Year's to everyone. This has been a very eventful year with the war in Ukraine, the significant casualties, what we've seen in Gaza as we move to the second phase, with the devastation that we've all witnessed there, the demonstrations in Iran as we speak, very significant demonstrations. The most recent Chinese efforts to further intimidate Taiwan with their military exercises around the island of Taiwan. I can go down the whole list of issues, whether it's Sudan, Nigeria, etc. but this has been a very eventful year. And we've been with all of our listeners, our viewers, talking about these issues. And we will continue in the year of 2026, to talk about the issues as they unfold. And as we saw over the recent weekend, the situation in Venezuela will evolve, and we will follow that very closely with all of you. But again, our focus is North Korea. It's the Korean Peninsula. It's Northeast Asia, and we'll stay with Korea. And we've seen most recently the ballistic missile launches of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, and the continuation in their very close relationship with the Russian Federation and the mutual defense treaty they have. All these issues we'll cover in 2026. But today we're very lucky to have Dr. Schadlow to talk about the national security strategy and what that means for the United States and for our allies and partners and for the global community. So over to you, Dr. Schadlow.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ambassador, and thank you to everyone on this webinar. It's great to be here in the new year, and I look forward to a lively discussion with my colleagues here. So I thought I would start first talking about a little bit, going through some of the commonalities between the 2017 Trump National Security Strategy and the one published in 2025, right as we were right in December of 2025. I think there are significant continuities, but then I'd also like to get into some of the areas of debate that I think the larger community is having today. Keeping in mind overall that, national security strategies are statements that evolve and shift. They set a strategic direction, or they explain a strategic direction, but they're not immutable. They evolve over time, as all strategies need to, and they're not absolute. And there are lots of people who even say, what's the value of these documents? We can talk about that at the end too, if we want. In thinking about a title for these brief remarks, I thought sort of came up with the idea of continuity supercharged, right? There is definitely continuity between the 2017 framework that was articulated. The world is a competitive place. China is a strategic competitor. Power matters. Peace through strength. All of these were themes in the 2017 document. And in today's document, we see all of those themes, and in some senses, more. The first document, as I noted, described peace through strength, the importance of maintaining a strong military, the importance of maintaining security over America's borders, the concept and theme of sovereignty, that the nation state mattered and should matter. It discussed the importance of maintaining economic strength, economic security as being national security. All of these should be familiar to viewers, because they are in fact key elements of both the first Trump administration and the second, and key elements of this second strategy. As in all strategies, the documents are organized somewhat differently. There's no playbook for writing a strategy. There's no set formula for doing it. So different administrations organize strategies in different ways. In Trump 1, we chose to focus on what we called four core pillars, or four core American national interests: protect the homeland, ensure economic prosperity and grow prosperity, preserve peace through strength, and advance American influence. The current document is organized differently. It's organized around 10 key principles that are articulated, from fairness to ensuring balances of power remain strong and regional balances of power so that no one country dominates those regions, to the importance of sovereignty. These are principles that are articulated in the document. I won't go through all 10, but they're there, I think, on page 8. In addition, the document is framed around the 5 key regions of the world: Asia, Europe, Western Hemisphere, Africa, and one more that is, and the Middle East, of course, the Middle East. So again, as in the first document, these regional balances of power and the importance of these regions of the world to American interests are articulated. And I think that that's a strong kind of counterpoint to many who argue that the United States is going to be in retreat under Trump. That was a key criticism early on. I think it's clear we're not. And now there are critics arguing on the opposite side, we're doing too much, intervening too much. But clearly those 5 regions of the world remain important to the United States, as historically they have been. And the debates are about how to best preserve balances in those regions. And I think it's significant, as I mentioned, that this 2025 strategy says specifically that the United States does not want to see these regions of the world dominated by adversaries. And I think that's important because while the current document doesn't articulate competitors in the same way or geopolitical competition in the same way, that language about not wanting to see regions of the world dominated by another power, language about wanting to ensure that the United States remain economically strong and not disadvantaged, the language about needing to ensure that stability based on strength exists in the world, de facto means we're still in a competitive environment, and the United States wants to set the conditions for that competition. In terms of the regions, and then I'll end with some of the tensions or bigger debates. China is framed in a different way, not specifically called out as a strategic competitor as the first strategy did, but clearly in all of the discussion of China in the document, China is a competitor. The document discusses how the United States doesn't want to see China have the ability to coerce others in regions of the world, to disadvantage the United States, to ensure that we have reciprocity and fairness with China, that's critical for our economic vitality, to ensure that we remain a strong technological power, the strongest in the world and the most innovative. So clearly underlying all of those objectives means we need to remain firm vis-a-vis China, continuing many of Trump's first administration's policies toward China, many of the Biden administration's policies toward China, and what we're seeing now. Clearly, the president wants to keep a dialogue open with China, and I think that's why some of the language in the second document is more tempered, wanting to ensure that there's stability through dialogue and maintain dialogue so that conflict doesn't erupt. The document's quite strong on Taiwan, maintain the status quo. It sees Taiwan as a critical region of the world to ensure that sea lanes remain open. So it's even more important than just for economic reasons. Reasons related to semiconductors and TSMC. So that language is quite strong. And it articulates a very important role for allies and partners in the Indo-Pacific and in Asia. I think all of those things are good things. In terms of the framing of Europe, that's where there's a lot of, I would say, concern, consternation. Many Europeans were very angry by the framing of Europe in the document, which argues that Europe needs to focus on its domestic trajectory as a whole, that Europe as a whole is economically stagnating and is not producing the type of economic strength that will allow it long-term to be a long-term strong ally, to maintain much stronger military strength, shared responsibility, all of those components. That's why, in my view, the document discusses Europe in that way. It was very upsetting to many Europeans, and happy to discuss this more with my colleagues. The Western Hemisphere, of course, is there's a lot of time spent on the Western Hemisphere in the document, a focus on regional champions in the region, again, saying that we want to work with allies and partners to ensure a more stable region that doesn't produce instability, such as migration, such as drug flows, growth of drug cartels, that then impact the United States negatively. And that's a good thing, and it's reasonable. And it's something that for a long, long time, many American strategists have said we need to do more in thinking about stability in the Western Hemisphere. The means, how we're going to do all these things, I think is also worth calling out. I think it's very positive. A broad network of alliances, a powerful and capable military, soft power and cultural influences, and maintaining the most advanced and innovative tech sector, as I said. These are some of the means in the strategy, the how we are going to use this toolkit to advance the objectives that it sets forth. But as I wrap now, some concerns going forward or some areas of debate, which I'd love to also hear from my colleagues. There's a sense that the document is too focused on America looking at itself and what's good for itself, and that this somehow is going to lead to a more fractured world. These are the points that many critics make. So I'm just saying that these are not my points. I'm characterizing some of the criticisms and concerns about the document. That somehow America focusing on itself first means that this will lead to more, as one of a colleague at another think tank put it, a lonelier, weaker, and more fractured future. I don't think that's the case. I think it acknowledges realistically power shifts, but that concern has been voiced by many. Second, that it's a less ideological document, that it doesn't refer to China as a systemic rival, as a clash of systems, in the way that many China hawks actually think about China, and I'm probably in that category of seeing China as a long-term systemic rival, as offering a different system, one that's not as good as ours, of course, but as a rival to the United States. That the document doesn't engage in that ideological kind of concern. And that third, it's a document that reemphasizes the primacy of the nation state over global institutions, and that this too is problematic to many, that many see this elevation of the nation state as the primary actor as meaning that the United States will not cooperate, as interpreting this as less multilateralism, as opposed to, in my view, a different form of cooperation, as acknowledging a reality that leads then to different forms of coalitions of the willing. So these three kind of last themes: is the world going to be more fractured? Does it matter that it's positioning things in a less ideological way? And does it, what's the significance of elevating the nation state? I think these are big themes that are worth discussing in this group and maybe for the audience. Thank you.
Well, Nadia, this is outstanding. Oh, a great overview of the national security strategy. And as you said, you ended with this point, the nation state. Does that take is that the key? And you talked about America first. Some of our critics saying, are we putting the nation state ahead of everything else? A focus on the Western Hemisphere, understandably, and protection of the homeland, understandably. All these pieces come out and so forth. Talking about China as a systemic competitor, basically, and not the hawk. There are a lot of hawkish views on China, and they're all understandable. And I could share a lot of those views and so forth. But there's a lot to discuss. And today we'll have this opportunity to do that. So Nadia, you set the stage so well, and I thank you for that. And we'll go right to Alexandre and we'll start this discussion. Alexandre.
Thank you. And I'm going to apologize for taking sips of water. I'm fighting what has been a very persistent cold that I think many parts of America have suffered
we're all
through the
sharing
holidays.
that with you, Nadia.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
No problem. Over to you, Alexandre.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador. And Nadia, what a fantastic opening to our discussion today. Really, you said it all. I don't know what to say, but let me start by joining the Ambassador and congratulating our global audience with the new year. Let me say good riddance to the annus horribilis. And it's the year past, not only when innocent people were held in jail in friendly countries, I might add, but also when this horrible conflict in Ukraine, passed the 2 million man mark. That's the official number. People killed in Ukraine, on the Russian side, another million. So when we're thinking about it, these are horrendous numbers. I mean, 3 million plus, we're going into the 5th year. This is awful. And only a miracle, in my opinion, can stop it. So I'm praying for this annus mirabilis, 2026. I hope our president will succeed in putting an end to this war. I know how difficult and challenging this task is. It's really a Herculean task. But if not President Trump, then who can do it? Also, Gaza, as Ambassador mentioned, I mean, the tremendous casualties there, protests in Iran, and all what we saw just in the past few days. On January 3rd, I mean, which is becoming like a Groundhog Day, Qasem Soleimani, January 3rd, now Nicolas Maduro, January 3rd. I mean, if you're an autocrat and a dictator who say that you don't like America, then January 3rd must be the day when you really should go into hiding and watch out. But aside this lighter mode, let me ask you a couple of questions about the national security strategy. I know you are an insider. I mean, you were indispensable in drafting President Trump's first national security strategy in 2017. And of course, you know very well how the process works. And so for the benefit of our audience, I would like you to walk us through the process of drafting the national security strategy to the extent that you can. I know it's kind of not in the open domain, but to the extent that you can you talk to us about who usually does what in putting together this important document? I mean, whose ideas are reflected there? Is it all the president's or his right-hand man, left-hand man? I don't know, national security advisor, all different agencies. I mean, whose interests does this document usually reflect? And again, how and who squares the issues of morality, if you wish, legality, international law, national interests, personal interests, politics, when you put together this document? Again, I know I'm asking a question really about how the sausage is being made. You are the chef. I mean, you are one of the most important cooks putting it together, baking it. So if you could lift the veil a little bit for our global viewers, I would really appreciate it. And just to cap it off, I mean, could you speak a little bit about the impact of national security strategy on real policy? I mean, why should we even think about it if, it's connected or disconnected from real policy? So I would appreciate if you could illuminate those kind of hidden issues for us a little bit.
It is a big question. I think that there's no, and I think it's to many, the answer will always be somewhat dissatisfying because there's no sort of scientific method to producing a national security strategy, right? So many in the military, many in the scientific community, they like kind of very concrete approaches and methods. And just as in the broader area of leadership and management, there are always different approaches. And you go in kind of with a set of personalities and I think adapt some of those approaches. I think I think it's unquestionable that especially in the Trump administration, the content of those strategies very much reflected what the White House, the Oval Office, the president, and his closest advisors think and thought, as it should be, right? It is a document that comes from a White House that is elected in a democracy. I think there's often a foreign policy kind of community that thinks that somehow these documents are apolitical, that they're apart from politics. But we live in a democracy. New people are elected with new ideas, and those ideas naturally would form a part of a national security strategy. Now, of course, that doesn't mean they're there aren't, and there are continuities, and there should be continuities, and you can't go up and down on a defense budget indefinitely without having a measurable negative impact on that budget. So peace through strength, for the most part, has been a strong kind of theme in American national security strategies. To a degree, after the Cold War, our defense budget went way down. There was a rationale for that. It's been moving back up, and it's been a part of the Trump administration's emphasis. I mean, even within the administration, there are fights about how big the budget should be, but a clear theme in this strategy was we need to maintain a strong military that can deter our adversaries. So you will see those continuities in previous strategies. I mean, in Trump 1, we ran a process to get this strategy done that didn't mean that it was overtaken by bureaucracy. I think we were lucky that we ran it in a way that was both quite autonomous. We had a lot of the ability to drive things pretty quickly, which is why it was completed within the first year of the administration. I like this strategy, right? I think also they really made an effort to complete it in the first year of an administration. Sometimes it takes much longer for administrations. But at the same time, the process we ran, which is essentially a process, means meetings. As in government, you meet, you talk, you go over parts of the document, drafts, but we ran it with a balance, in my view, of also knowing that the talks and the discussion would not be interminable, right? Pushing back against a bureaucracy sometimes that wants to talk and talk and talk, as opposed to at a certain point say, well, this is the language we're going to use. This is what we're going to say, and the conversation ends. I think there's always a give and take between what established offices in the government, whether that the Defense Department, Department of War, Department of State, Department of Treasury, and then the new political appointees that come in. And it is in a sense sausage making. You're putting things together, but I think the important thing is that in the end, you're taking decisions to end the process so that you can come to an agreement, or even if not agreement, a decision on these are the themes that we're going to articulate. This is the language we're going to use. There's always a push and pull. I held the electron, so to speak. My office sort of was putting the language together, passing it back out to parts of the interagency, the State Department, Department of War, Department of Treasury, Department of Commerce, but also not necessarily accepting all the changes that come in either. Reminding everyone, this is the president's document. This needs to be and should be consistent with what he said in the past and what he's saying right now. And I remember in 2017, there was always an effort to sort of separate the document from President Trump and what he was saying and thinking. But I think as future historians look at both what he was saying in his campaign and the speeches that he made in the first year of his administration, you will see a lot of consistency in both, as it should be. I don't know the exact process that was followed in this 2025 document. My understanding is that it was a very close collaboration between the State Department and the White House. And my sense is from reading it that seems to be the case. I have no reason to think that's not the case. I don't know if if as many meetings took place over it, but I think you do see a lot of inputs from I can imagine different parts of the bureaucracy, whether it's the discussion on trade imbalances, the discussion on borders, the discussion on the Western Hemisphere, the discussion about Europe. I think you could probably, process trace, go back and figure out where those voices are from and point to them in the current document. But there's no set scientific formula for doing these strategies. It's the way kind of strategy making is, right? There are different approaches about how you emphasize ways, ends, and means, whether the degree to which strategies should be linked to budgets. And of course, in theory, they should. In our system, there's never been that exact alignment between what the American budget, what the US budget looks like, and what many strategies say. There's always been a disconnect historically for a lot of reasons. So it's an imperfect art. I think it's a necessary one, especially in a democracy, to convey a sense of a strategic direction, a rationale, a set of arguments that we should be having public debates about. Not everyone's going to agree. And those debates, in turn, help policymakers, Congress, argue for different priorities. So I think it's a useful process. I don't think it's just an academic process. I think we would be worse off for not having one, however imperfect it is. Thanks, Sasha.
No, that's excellent, Nadia. No, a great question, and thank you for educating us on how the process is pursued. Uh, the national security strategy for 2025, very bold. I wrote a piece for the Washington Times on that. A very bold document. I mean, with the focus on the Western Hemisphere, and we're seeing this now with the Venezuela. But a focus on the Western Hemisphere, but also a focus on the first island chain, making it very clear, as you said a few minutes ago, Nadia, the status quo in the Taiwan Strait, peaceful resolution to the Taiwan issue, a very, very important element there. There's no question about that. But looking to our allies, South Korea and Japan, to protect this first island chain, so that we can ensure that there is a status quo in the Taiwan Strait, which is a very important issue. But as you said, also Europe was really not a heavy part of that strategy in 2025. In fact, a lot of criticism that we're not giving that much credit. But I think it's very clear with this the Trump administration that the Trump administration expects more of Europe, and I think all Americans or most Americans feel the same. To get more involved in their own defense, raising it up to 5% of their GDP for defense purposes and so forth. So I think it's a very bold, it's a very meaningful document. It certainly has legs, and we're seeing that in Venezuela now in a profound way. But again, I go back to that first island chain and the importance of Taiwan and the Taiwan keeping the status quo in the Taiwan Strait, and so forth. What was a little surprising was no mention of North Korea, uh, and that did surprise me just a bit. Even maybe one sentence to say that we're concerned on that, and that will be one of my questions to you, Nadia, on that is the national security strategy for 2025 is in my view, a bold document. And again, we're seeing it in Venezuela in spades. And it's saying protect the homeland, as you said up front, to protect the homeland, looking at the Western Hemisphere and ensuring that we do not have bad actors in the Western Hemisphere and so forth. And that would be another one of my questions to you on that, Nadia. So when we look at that focus on the Monroe Doctrine, if you will, although a former Secretary of State did mention that the Monroe Doctrine is over, and that's the past. Well, it's not the past, and we're seeing that in the spades right now as we speak and discuss these issues. But my questions to you are these. Why do you think the North Korea was not even mentioned in the document, given their now mutual defense treaty with the Russian Federation, the war in Ukraine, and as Alexandre said so correctly, the significant casualties we're seeing from this war in Ukraine, and hopefully we can get a ceasefire and move towards a peaceful resolution to some of these issues here. But no mention of North Korea in the document. The focus on the Western Hemisphere, and who are those actors who could possibly be bad actors in the Western Hemisphere? Certainly, we've seen Russia basically aligned with Venezuela to a great extent, and indeed China. And I think before we had the the abduction of Maduro over the weekend, it was a Russian, it was if you will, a Chinese delegation that was meeting with President Maduro in Caracas at that time. So in addition to Russia and China, which is pretty obvious, is Iran and North Korea? What are some of those other actors who could, and what would be the effect of bad actors working in the Western Hemisphere, working, if you will, in Latin America? How would that impact the security of the United States? How do you see those issues, Nadia?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks. And I'd also like to bring in Sasha a little bit, especially on the North Korea side, because this is your area of expertise, and both of you are focused very much on Asia and have done a lot of work on North Korea, and maybe in your circles also are hearing a reason. I don't know. I think it's a puzzling omission. I think the question is it a deliberate omission, or what I think of as a process omission, where because it was a different type of process that produced the document. Sometimes, as in any situation, things get left out. Was it deliberate or not? I don't know. I do think, as I said, it's a puzzling omission. I think it's been a frustrating sort of stalemated situation for many, many years. So maybe also the administration is continuing to work through how you actually affect more positive change, because clearly it's been a tough road with North Korea, and our policies have not been extremely successful. I think Trump 1 really tried with maximum pressure, and it was the best set of policies we had seen in a long, long time.
Yes.
But China was not cooperating, and it limited overall the long-term effects. But I would actually like to hear from Sasha on this in terms of what is your sense of that omission, but also what how did China and North Korea react, in the sense that of you following sort of that literature, those news reports on that omission? How has the broader community thought about it?
Sasha, over to you. What do you think? Why do you think North Korea was not mentioned in the national security strategy? That seemed like a major omission.
Yeah. That's an interesting question. Again, Nadia, obviously this is my personal opinion. I don't have any insider knowledge here, but I do not believe it was a matter of omission. Again, with respect to national security strategy, of course, you were the chef. You know how it's put together. But North Korea has always been on the radar screen in Washington, especially on President Trump's radar screen. So I don't believe that this issue was omitted by mistake. I think it was intentional, and the reason for that is because, again, it's a controversial issue. It's too early to say anything positive about North Korea, but by saying nothing negative, at least you would create an opening. You would create an opening for positive dialogue. And we know President Trump has a special interest in North Korea. And I wouldn't be surprised to see new initiative from the president before the end of his term with respect to the Korean Peninsula. And so, in my opinion, again, it's an intentional decision to create an opening for positive dialogue with North Korea, and aides to the president being sensitive to his views on this. They decided to be safe than sorry, and basically played it safe. So again, that gave me hope. That gave me hope for president's continued interest in this matter, and his hope that it can still be, he can still resolve it. I mean, he can
Right.
still move the ball forward on all the critical issues which are on the table with North Korea. Now, Ambassador, if I may ask my own question.
Yeah, but I want to one last question for Nadia from me, Alexander, and I'll go right back to you.
Yeah.
No, one last question. And Nadia, I know we're not talking about Venezuela here, because, but the national security strategy is big on the Western Hemisphere, understandably. And as you said before, protecting the homeland goes back to the national security strategy in 2017. So my question is this, my last question, and then over to you, Alexander, is Nadia, what do you think? Is this a sort of I don't want to use the word precedent, but I will use a precedent. Is this sort of telling others that maybe in China for Xi Jinping, maybe this is an approach you should use in regards, and then this has been in the media this morning, over the last day, certainly, of maybe encouraging others to follow suit, and maybe Xi Jinping and China, the People's Republic of China, should be looking at Taiwan in the same way, and maybe just going in there and doing something. Although we've made it clear also in the National Security Strategy of 2025 that there should be the status quo and a peaceful resolution, the status quo in the Taiwan Strait, peaceful resolution to the Taiwan issue. So how do you square the two? Are we saying this is sort of are we setting a precedent?
No, we're not. We're not setting a precedent. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what? How do you see that?
We're not setting a precedent. We have long been concerned about the growth of drug cartels, narco states, destabilized states in the Western Hemisphere that border the United States, are very close to the United States, and form places that bad actors can operate from, and protecting ourselves from those bad actors because other processes have not been successful at that, as tens of thousands of Americans die every year from drugs, as states on our borders are weakened by really bad actors. No one likes these drug cartels, yet they're growing and growing in power and concern. They're allowing destabilizing activities to take place in areas that border the United States. We've long talked about a drug war, and nothing's really has worked, right? So we're shifting to actually doing something about a set of threats that have impacted the United States in a negative way for a long, long time. And protecting ourselves from those bad actors and forces that are emanating from nearby regions that are affecting us internally. That's the dynamic that's at play as I see it. Making clear to China that operating from that region in ways that are detrimental to U.S. interests, something that we're going to be watching for. So the idea of caring about what happens in our region, again, doesn't mean that that we don't care about the rest of the world, doesn't mean that we don't care about regions being dominated by actors in the rest of the world. The strategy also clearly says we want to help good, positive alignments emerge, both in the Western Hemisphere and around the world. Taiwan is not a threat in any way to China's interests.
Nadia, thank you so much.
I don't see it as I see it as a flip side of America kind of saying, look, we waited a long time. The international community for a long, long time has condemned Maduro, and existing multilateral processes did not do anything about that, nor did it really address any, people often, human rights is a big issue, it was a big issue for the Biden administration for its Build Back Better world. But millions and millions of people suffered under Maduro.
No, I couldn't agree more with you. Excellent answer. Alexander.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador. And I'm someone who sometimes makes politically incorrect points. So let me say that 15 out of 19 hijackers on 9/11 came from Saudi Arabia, and yet we bombed Afghanistan. So fentanyl is not produced or transported from Venezuela, and cocaine, which is made, is shipped to Europe, not to the United States. And yet we went after Maduro, accusing him of being a drug lord. So it's dubious, to say the least. I mean, I like what President Trump did because it kind of sent a very powerful message to the world. Don't play games with America. What we say, we mean it. And it's an important message after some weak leadership we saw before. But, you know, again, it's a controversial decision which took a lot of leadership and courage for the president to make. I'm not sure I would have gone with the same rationale. Nevertheless, here is my question, and it's very simple. I mean, the Doctrine National Security Strategy talks about strategic restraint. And yet, when you look at the actions of the administration in Venezuela, last summer in Iran, again, the threats which were issued to other states in the Western Hemisphere, or against some of our NATO allies, like Denmark, for example, you know, how do you square that strategic intent of being restrained around the world, actually, maybe even retreating a little bit, de-emphasizing the Middle East, as you said, kind of loosening our ties with Europe, and at the same time, very proactive, maybe even aggressive kind of policy moves in real world. So please help me square that, and in general, talk about how national security strategy, you know, impacts real life policy. Does it, or is real life policy making something completely different, and policymakers, they don't really have the document on their desks to guide them when they decide, you know, whether to, what target to choose, whether to execute the mission or not.
Thank you, Alexandre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I should clarify, I'm not a current administration official, so I'm not speaking for the administration. I'm speaking as someone who's also reading, writing, observing, like everyone on this call. I think there is a lot of consistency between the document and U.S. actions. I mean, I think it depends how you how the choices in describing it. I see this document as saying there are 5 regions of the world that will continue to be important to the United States. It discusses those 5 regions of the world. It gives more words to Western Hemisphere and reminds everyone that this region needs to be, you know, we need to refocus on this region. It gives more attention to it, certainly, but the Middle East is noted in the document. As I said, Europe is noted in the document. And I would just say on Europe, it's important. I think the fundamental issue is Europe's long-term economic health and strength overall meaningful for the transatlantic alliance? I think it is, and I think the current Trump administration thinks it is too. And that's the rationale, in my view, of why the document is seen as tough on Europe. But the fundamental issue is, does Europe's longer-term trajectory matter to the transatlantic alliance? I think it does. I think probably both of you on the webinar probably do as well. And so then you get into kind of the nitty-gritty of what to do about it, or does the United States have a right to talk about that? But the fundamental issue should be the one that we should be talking about with our European allies. I think, you know, what is the definition of I guess, restraint, sitting back and watching while Iran becomes stronger and stronger and stronger and potentially, you know, has the potential to destroy one of our most important allies, Israel? I don't see that as restraint. I mean, I think there's always a is restraint ignoring what's happening in Ukraine and sitting it out? No. So, I mean, I think all of the activities that we've seen the United States involved with over the past year, sort of the supercharging of them, have been, a balance. So defining them as, I'm not sure what restraint would mean other than then sitting back and being isolationist, which is what many wanted us to be. So I see the sets of activities that we've undertaken over the past year as consistent with a view that balance of power in the world matters, regional balances of power in the world matters, and in working with allies and partners to get them in a stronger place so they can do more, but also saying, we will be here too. We can't be everywhere, but we can continue to care about these parts of the world where we see our interests as being at stake. So, there's never a perfect, I'm not sure what a policy of restraint would, what it would exactly look like in region by region of the world. And some I could see more clearly. Clearly, people would say the current action in Venezuela is not one of restraint.
Nadia, just if we turn the tables around, I mean, what we did in Venezuela, does it give Russia the moral right to go out and take out Zelensky and basically decapitate that leadership and pursue regime change policy there? Because, restraint, you questioned. I mean, how much should we feel restrained? The same China, Ambassador DeTrani alluded to it. What our actions in Venezuela, do they give Xi Jinping the moral right to go after Taiwanese leadership, take it out and
No, because Taiwan is not a threat. I mean, you can have and Taiwan is not a threat to China,
and Ukraine is not. Beholder.
Ukraine,
it's our
Alexandre.
But Ukraine is not a threat to Russia.
Respond,
Ukraine has not been a threat to Russia. Ukraine is not a threat to Russia. We can and should push back on a Russian narrative that has been false about those issues. So, I mean, we're not going to resolve this here now, but I think
but Nadia,
international law. I mean, the common ground here, international law. Should we all be
Alexandre, let Nadia, please. Do you want
Okay,
to
I'm not.
finish
Yeah, international
response?
law has long been problematic. International law has looked. What has international law been saying for a long, long time in the Middle East, and its constant condemnation of Israel, of its kind of ambivalence about watching what Hamas has been doing to the Palestinian people, destroying them. I mean, international law has always been fraught with, frankly, by power, by politics, by the wishes of more powerful states and nation states. So I think, we never, international law has always, I'm not an international lawyer, but individuals like experts like Bill Barr and John Yoo and Robert Turner, who focused on international law, those are the people that I listen to and I try to learn from.
Okay. Thank you, Nadia. Nadia, if I may, let me just make one or two comments, and I have another question for you. Thank you and I like that the response you had to Alexandre's question a few minutes ago, and I want to pick up on that because I'm thinking back to the Opium Wars, going back to 1838 and so forth, where China was being, if you will, imposed upon, forced to take opium and from Great Britain, and that was the beginning of the Opium Wars, and we saw what happened with this century of humiliation and so forth, what followed on that. And I think back to most recently this weekend in Venezuela, on the whole question of what you said a few minutes ago on counter narcotics, where tens of thousands of Americans are dying each year because these drugs are coming into our country. And Venezuela, whether it's with Colombia, whether it's touching with the Sinaloa or the FARC in Colombia, or in Mexico with the Sinaloa cartel, or even others, where this was impacting the U.S. in a powerful way, not only and indeed, not only that, but the Russian Federation and China and Iran dealing with Venezuela. So this is the Western Hemisphere. And again, going back to your earlier comment about protecting the homeland, this is the 2017 National Security Strategy. We have to protect the homeland. And I think this is what this national security document, the strategy of 2025, says: protect the homeland, the Western Hemisphere. That is where the focus is, but also on the first island chain and the status quo in the Taiwan Strait, peaceful resolution to the Taiwan issue. Because we are not, and I think one of the questions I would have for you, Nadia, is on what Alexandre just said a minute ago. Are we setting a precedent here? But what is that precedent? We're not, when we deal with our Asian partners and certainly our allies in East Asia and in the Indo-Pacific, we're not threatening anyone. We're not out there with drugs. We're not out there trying to subvert or anything of that nature. So the situation is a little different. While in the Western Hemisphere, we see some of these bad actors in working with these nation states that could in fact affect our national security. So I guess my question to you is this, Nadia, is how do we better explain, because you talked about international law a minute ago, and we heard the UN Security Council debate yesterday, and that will continue on that, where the US will be criticized. But how do we say this is different than what's happening in East Asia or any other, the Indo-Pacific or the Middle East, or even with the war in Ukraine? Because as you said, Ukraine was not threatening to anyone. In fact, Ukraine had security assurances given to them by the Russian Federation and the United States and the UK, and that was violated. They gave up their nuclear weapons. So how do we better communicate to those who are criticizing us now with the actions we've taken to abduct Maduro, on the whole question of narco trafficking, but also aiding some of these narco terrorists? How do we better educate those critics to make it clear that the situation is different in the Western Hemisphere? And what we did in Ukraine with Venezuela over the weekend is much different than anything we've seen, certainly with the war in Ukraine, the Gaza, etc.
Yeah, as I said, because we're right at time, Ukraine is not threatening Russia. Taiwan is not threatening China. The US has the right to protect its citizens from an onslaught of drugs from the region. The US has a right to care about destabilizing states on the region. And there's a good thing involved in thinking about creating positive economic and political developments in the Western Hemisphere, outcomes that are good for citizens in that region who want a stable life, who want economic growth, who want to live in not in fear every day of these cartels that are taking over the region. So I would say to critics, why if there are a set of actions that improve outcomes and frankly humanitarian outcomes, that's a good thing. And just talking about those outcomes without actually thinking that sometimes is not enough. So in this case, I think that we're going to see a trajectory of more positive developments in the Western Hemisphere, and I think that that's a good thing. I mean, we can have a whole nother program of related to precedents, related to how allies and adversaries and others will interpret actions. But I think history has shown that there are always inconsistencies in foreign policies, ups and downs, and that's the nature of the entire field. So if anyone can point to 10 to 20 years of consistencies across the board, I'd like to see that.
Thank you, Nadia. This has really been a great discussion with a lot of issues on the table. Nadia, thank you so much. A great discussion. Michael, over to you.
Thank you, Joe. Dr. Schadlow, excellent program. Very, very interesting. Thank you, Dr. Mansourov and Ambassador DeTrani, the Washington Times. We want to thank. They will be covering this program. And I feel so much hope and understanding about our national security strategy thanks to this program and thanks to you, Dr. Schadlow, and these wonderful, wonderful discussion. So thank you to our audience, not only here in the United States, but throughout Europe, and Asia, especially in Korea. Have a great week, everyone. Thank you.
This webcast is pre-recorded.